Stars, cars, guitars.
Happy Days, just about the biggest thing on TV in the 1970s. And you had Richie and, of course, the Fonz and Poxy. And one of my favorite characters, Ralph Malph, played by Donny Most, who these days is knocking them dead doing his swing show. Well, guess what? He's over on the other side of the Atlantic. And if I go like this, Donny!
Alex, how are you?
I should start this by saying Sunday, Monday, happy days, but Donny Most, you've heard that one a million times.
I have heard it a few times here and there. Yes, I have. But you know, it's to be expected, right? It was a catchy tune also. It was pretty catchy.
It's a great theme, isn't it? I mean, it is so uplifting. It was so beautifully recorded. And of course, you and Anson Williams were singing in Happy Days, but it wasn't you guys singing the theme, was it?
No, we didn't sing the theme song. No. Pratt and McLean, I think, was the name of the group. I think they might have been studio musicians and they tacked on that name because they weren't really a group. I think that was the story. But, you know, the funny thing for me is that I actually preferred, in the first two seasons, or was it the first season alone? First season, they used Rock Around the Clock as our theme song. And I actually preferred that. I mean, the Happy Days theme song, you know, like you said, is very uplifting and joyous and a little infectious and all that. But I don't know, I was just a little more partial to Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock.
Now, be careful, Donny, because I might phone you. And if I phone you now and your ringtone is Sunday, Monday, happy days, we know you're lying.
Yeah, you'll catch me red-handed, yes.
Listen, I want to tell our viewers a story as well. So I've just interviewed Donny a few nights ago for my BBC radio show, and we did 25 minutes together. The hour before I went on air. It was a great interview. And I gave it to my producer and I said, can you just edit this, nip and tuck it? And then we'll play it out later in the show. So when we went to play it out, I knew then that I had 20 minutes where I could walk around the building, listen to the interview, and I was free to go and get a drink or whatever. So I wanted to go to the cupboard, this big cupboard at the BBC where I keep some CDs. So I go to this cupboard, and I'm not often in this cupboard. You are playing across the whole of the South on the BBC and through the tannoy. This is late on a Sunday night. There's no one else there. I reach up. I swear to God, this is true. I reach up to get some CDs and a book falls down. And look what book it was.
Oh, my gosh. How bizarre. Wow.
So I'm talking to you for the first time ever. And what falls out but the Happy Days annual, and it fell out at that page.
Oh my God, that's a little surreal. Well, I got the chills just now. That's pretty cool.
And do you know what, Donny? That book has been in that cupboard for 8 or 9 years with a load of other stuff I got untouched. Yeah.
I remember the cover of that book. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I do, now that I saw it, I'm flashing on all kinds of memories.
An amazing series, Happy Days. It was the Friends of its time. I mean, it officially was in 76 and 77, the #1 show. I mean, that must have just been amazing for this kid from New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn and, you know, loved, I wanted to pursue acting and singing. Singing was my first love, so to speak. I was pursuing that even before acting. And I started working. I started getting booked in a lot of TV commercials, some big national commercials in New York City and all that. Went out to California. And then, you know, the thought of, I wasn't necessarily looking to do a series. I just wanted to start getting film, TV work, and just start generating, you know, a career that I could do it for a lifetime. And it happened rather quickly once I got out to LA. And then we're shooting a pilot. I had really good feelings when we were shooting that pilot because the cast, I felt magic, you know, I felt like it was a wonderful combination and a fortuitous bringing together of personalities and talent. and you could feel the chemistry. And I was watching other scenes that I might not have even been in. I just wanted to watch everything, and I had a really good feeling. I don't think I could have predicted it would have had the immense success that it had, but I had a good feeling about it. But then, then you cut to several years later, and we're number one in the country for 2 years. It was pretty mind blowing. Big. It's like I used to say, it was like entering the Twilight Zone. Your life is changed in a profound way, going from relative anonymity, total anonymity, to you can't walk down the street, without being recognized. So yeah, huge culture shock and change in your life. Absolutely.
Donny, if I had a hit like that, or if I was in a hit like that, the one thing that I would be thinking, and you must have thought this, is Sinatra probably watched Happy Days, and better than that for us, Elvis. I bet Elvis loved Happy Days. Did you ever get a message from Graceland that the king was watching you down in the jungle room?
Oh God, I wish so. No, I never got that message. And it's funny because you'd run into people from here and there, and then you'd find out they'd say that they watched the show and they liked the show, and you're and you'd be sort of like taken aback, like you forget how many people are watching it, and then it includes all kinds of other actors, celebrities, and I'd be like, oh my God, you watched the show, that kind of thing. Sinatra, yeah, I don't know if I ever stopped and said, I wonder if Frank's watching this. I probably did. I probably thought about that. And then I got to appear at his, he had a celebrity golf tournament in Palm Springs back then, and every year, and I got invited, and it was his last year. I think it was his last year. And there was an after party. I didn't get to meet him during the tournament, but there was an after party for all the celebs. And I walked into there was a tented area, and I walk in and I see some people, and all of a sudden I look to my left, and 10 feet away, there's Frank and his wife. And I'm like, I'm just frozen, and never got the guts to go over and say hello. But that was pretty cool, just being that close. And I was watching him like a hawk, But yeah, maybe he did watch the show. I'll never know.
Well, we think John Lennon was probably a fan because he turns up on the lot, Soundstage 19 at Paramount with Julian Lennon, who's probably about 10 or 11, I'm guessing at the time, with this wonderful photograph, which we've got here. Now, this photograph that we're showing now, which is on the internet, ended up on the internet because of you, didn't it?
I think so. I'm pretty sure, because I have that picture. What happened was pretty soon after we took the picture, I think it was a publicist from Paramount Studios who took it, and he was kind enough to give all of us a copy. This is back in 1974, probably February of 74. And, I had it, I treasured it, so I kept it. And years later, I moved from one house to another, but I always, knew where it was, and I had it, and now the internet is part of our lives and all that. So one day, I can't remember, and I don't think Henry had his copy and Anson, because when I told him about it, he was like saying, I can't find mine. So I made copies for them, but I posted it one day, just because I'm learning now about, what you could do online and how you could post and all that kind of stuff. And I posted it, and, got a huge reaction. And then I remember, like 6 months later, I see it showing up here, and I see it showing up here, and I see it showing up everywhere. So I'm pretty sure that it was me getting it out there, and other people were able to download it or whatever. And this spread around a lot since then.
So there you were in 1964. The Beatles are on the Ed Sullivan Show. And just 10 years later, and you must have seen that because everyone in America claims they were watching that night. 10 years later, there you are with the coolest one.
I know, unbelievable. It was so surreal. And it happened. It was so funny the way it happened, because we were in the Arnold's, the set of Arnold's, because we were not shooting in front of an audience yet. That didn't happen until our third season. This is still the first season. So we're shooting it like a movie. So we're on this interior set of Arnold's drive-in and rehearsing a scene. And we took a break, and Anson went to get a cup of coffee. And where the coffee machine was located was right near the entrance to the soundstage. So he comes back a minute or two later. He's got this funny look on his face, and he says, "There's a guy who just walked into soundstage, looks a lot like John Lennon." And we kind of, I think we just started laughing because we're, yeah, right, John Lennon. He's gonna all of a sudden come and visit us, right? And so we're laughing about it. Then a minute later, we see a guy with long hair and a young boy. I think he was 9 at the time, and we start looking. We're all looking, and jaws are dropping to the floor, and we realize, my God, it is John Lennon. And you're speechless. It's like you can't. You feel like you're dreaming or something. It was so bizarre. So it turns out he was on a trip, out to the West Coast, and Julian was with him, and I think he was going to show him Disneyland and all that, and I guess maybe Julian had seen the show. We'd probably only been on the air, maybe 3 or 4 episodes had aired at that point, and maybe he liked it. And John, of course, is a fan of 50s music, so maybe he liked it too. I don't know, but they came and they just hung out on the set for several hours, and he was so humble and so soft-spoken and gentle and so low-key and kind of in this calm place, and then they watched the rehearsal, and then I found out after, and we talked for a while, and we took that great picture, which I have hanging on my wall right there, and then I found out later, Anson told me this, that while we were rehearsing, he was talking to some of the crew members, and he was like doodling stuff on napkins and handing out his doodles to all the crew. And Anson's like saying to me afterwards, "Why didn't we get any of those doodles? He didn't give us." We were like bummed that we didn't get those. They're probably worth a lot of money and just would have been cool to have. But that picture was I don't want to say enough. Always could have been more, but it was pretty amazingly special.
And as I said to you the other night when we were doing a similar conversation on the radio, you would have thought that Gary Marshall or someone would have sat John down in the booth as an extra at Arnold's. How cool would that have been? Because he was just sat on the set anyway.
I know. I think all of us went, numb in the brain. I think back Jerry Paris, our director, because Gary wasn't there. Gary wasn't on the set. But Jerry, our director, you'd think in hindsight, they should have got the cameras rolling and done something, but maybe they felt it would have been an imposition and maybe didn't know how to approach John to ask him, to do that. Everybody was just so sort of tongue-tied, I think,
And everyone's trying to be cool. We're used to superstars coming in every day. Now, look, a couple of things. In Britain, Happy Days, as you know, was massive like it was all over the world. But for me, on the commercial television region that I was in the South, it was always on in the 5 o'clock slot on a Friday, or it was on Saturday lunchtime for me. And it varied around the UK, but it was always a weekend show. I think for a little while they put it out on a Monday, and I hated it because to me, Happy Days meant the weekend. But for you guys in America, the big slot was Tuesday night.
Yeah, it was Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Tuesday night. For most parts of the country, it was 7. But yeah, it was just a regular weeknight. That's interesting. And for you, it would have a different feel being on a Friday, like a weekend feel, like you said. Ours was just Tuesday, and it never moved. It was when we came on the air, ABC, the network that we were on, they were in last place. They were perennially, whatever, in last place. And our show, we started winning our time slot, and then we didn't really become a big hit until the 3rd season. But and then when we started really, first it was our time slot, And then ABC started winning Tuesday nights. And then when we became really big, and then we spun off Laverne and Shirley and all that, then ABC became the #1 network. They went from the last to first, all with the Happy Days, I think, being the sort of the start of that rise for them.
And what difference did it make to you guys? I mean, as a viewer, I much preferred it when I heard usually Tom Bosley saying Happy Days is videotaped in front of a live studio audience. I mean, that, I don't know why, but I thought, well, this is going to be exciting. I don't know what difference it made, but what did it, was it more of a performance then for you?
Yeah, it definitely, because, it sort of became a hybrid between a theater type performance and camera, because when you're doing it the original way that we did, like a movie, the cameras are placed for the optimum angle to get however the director is seeing the scene shot, close-ups, this angle. There's no flat proscenium, like in a theater. You just capture it like you do, like it's in life, and so there's a certain type of level of performance for that. It's a much more intimate, much more subtle, realistic, when you think of, performances in movies and stuff, where it feels like life. Then when you're doing it in front of an audience, so now they have all the sets lined up and they move the camera from one set to the next, but it's kind of flat. And they have the 3 cameras. So it's more of a flat, it is a little bit of a proscenium angle that you're seeing all the action, as opposed to, a 360 opportunity. And then you have an audience there. So you're playing to the audience, but the cameras are there too. So it's kind of this hybrid. But it definitely changed. If you look at the episodes from the first 2 seasons, it's much more subtle, a little more low key, and it's more cinematic. And you have stuff at the Arnold's drive-in outdoors with the cars, and like a movie. Then you look at the 3rd season and it feels like we're performing in front of an audience, like almost a little bit of a theatrical presentation of it. So it's definitely, and it's a little hotter. It's a hotter, more electric feel, because there's that interaction and the communion between you and the audience, and they're laughing and it's getting everybody jazzed. And so it's a little dance that goes on between you and the audience, obviously.
Absolutely. Now, listen, this is going to be dangerous, because this could really fall flat now, or we might get a good story out of you. I've not done enough homework to see if the timelines meet up on this, Donny, but I'm going to go for it. In Britain, Phil Silvers as Sergeant Bilko was huge. I know it only ran for a couple of years, but the BBC showed it for years and years and years. So it was even showing up to the end of the 80s regularly, maybe even into the 90s, late night on the BBC. All right.
Oh, okay.
So that show, I think it was bigger in Britain than it was in America. So I was delighted when Kathy Silvers brings her dad, Phil Silvers, in for one episode. Now, you're either going to say, yeah, Alex, great, but I'd left by then, or you're going to say, I was there when Phil Silvers walked in. What's it going to be, Donny Most?
I wish I was there. Oh,
no!
I wish, because I was already gone. But the fact is, I was a huge Bilko fan. I loved that show as a kid. I wasn't even there when Kathy joined the cast, because she joined the cast after Ron Howard and I left after the 7th season. And then, so they brought in some new characters and all that. And Kathy was brought in as Joni's best friend, Jenny Piccolo. So I wasn't even there when she came in. But then I heard about the fact that Phil came in as a guest star, and I was like bummed that I didn't get to, because he was like, sort of an idol of mine when I was a kid. I just thought he was the funniest guy, on TV. Him and then I used to, there were the guys that I used to love. I loved Abbott and Costello. They were favorites of mine. Phil Silvers. I was a big W.C. Fields fan in his movies. I loved W.C. and Jack Benny, and then there were some others, the Marx Brothers, of course. And but Phil was right up there my idols, my comedy idols.
Tell me Anson Williams phoned you, because he when you and Ron left, he stayed. Tell me he phoned you and said, look, you may have left to go on to Past Is New, but we've got Phil Silvers, Sergeant Bilko on the show this week.
He might have called me. I'm trying to remember how I found out. It very well might have been Anson calling me. And Anson and I talk all the time now. We speak like, at least once a week, maybe twice a week. So we're still great friends.
Now, as you can tell, I'm a massive fan, but I haven't actually sat down and watched it for years and years and years. Oh. It's something I'm always going to go back and visit. So I'm going to take another risk here. Okay. I fell flat with my Phil Silvers, but we got a good story out of it, Donny, so we're safe. But this now could be very dangerous, because I'm sure, but I wouldn't put money on it, you were there. You were still there. I think it was probably your last season when Robin Williams arrived as Mork.
I definitely was there when Robin came. Trying to remember what season. It might have been season 7. I can't, season 6 or 7. I definitely was there for that. You couldn't forget that, and luckily I was there. That was an interesting story, because it was probably if you ask all of us in the cast, we'd probably say initially we thought it was the worst script that had been handed to us of any of the episodes, because it was just so, a Martian, a guy from another planet, it turned out to be a dream, but it just seemed forced, and it didn't track really well, and we were worried about this script, and they had trouble casting the guy to play Orc. They initially cast somebody, and after like the first day of rehearsal, he quit, and I think because he realized like, this is going to turn out bad for me, So they didn't know what they were going to do, who are we going to get? It's like Wednesday, and we shoot in front of an audience on Friday, and they have to cast the lead guest role. So I think it was, I don't know if it was Penny Marshall or Penny and Gary's sister, Ronnie Hallen, who was working on Happy Days, who said they'd seen a comedian at the Comedy Store, which was a famous comedy club on Sunset Boulevard. And they said, this guy would be perfect. And so they found out, they said, okay, they called him in. He came in and did an audition in Gary's office. From what I heard the story, I wasn't there. And he did all these crazy things and flipped Gary and the director, Jerry, out. He got the part immediately. He came in, we started rehearsing. Well, I wasn't there on Thursday morning, because my call was until later. My first scene was until later. But when I walked onto that soundstage, 11, 12 o'clock, on Thursday, there was this palpable buzz as soon as I walked into that soundstage. I can't even describe it. And there was this buzz, and I'm hearing this, and I walk in and I see people and talking in huddles, and then somebody rushes over to me and says, "Where do you see this guy? Where do you see who they got to play Mork?" I go, "Really?" And he's unbelievable, So I walk over, and they're in the middle of a scene. Robin was doing a scene. I think it was with Henry and Ron, and I'm watching, and you kind of like, what? Who is this guy? It seemed like he was from another planet. He was coming up with all these sounds and improvisations and lines that you knew he was ad-libbing, and it was brilliant. And I found out later that one of the characters he did in the stand-up act was sort of like an alien character. So he already had this arsenal of sort of tools under his belt for this guy, and he put it to good use. But he turned what could have been our worst show into a great episode. It was so great that by Friday night the buzz was so prevalent that all the suits from ABC were there watching on Friday. And then after the weekend, we show up at work on Monday, and I think it was Monday or Tuesday, we hear, "Oh, Robin's got his own show now. He's got a spin-off."
Wow. Like that. It's funny, Donny, this is fascinating, because to me, watching it at the time, I thought this has been written for this amazing guy because they just wanted to get him in Happy Days. But obviously it wasn't. That's amazing.
Yeah, there was some real destiny and fate at work that all of it went down the way it did, and that he got that part. Because nobody could have been, he was as good as nobody could have been as good as him in that role. And then it just showcased him, and then launched him, obviously, and then into an amazing career where he did so many things of different variety and styles and comedy, drama, everything.
So you leave the show in 1980, the same time as Ron Howard. It causes a massive dent in the program, and for many of us, it was never the same. Once they burnt the original Arnolds down, and they kind of time shifted the show, took it out of the 50s, didn't really put it in the 70s or early 80s. They just didn't make as many references to the 50s. So there's a time shift in the program, and you and Ron leave. Was that a huge decision to leave the number one show on American TV?
Yeah, it was a huge decision. We weren't number one anymore at that point, but we were still probably in the top 5, because we were in the top 3 I think Laverne and Shirley might have taken over number 1 from us. And then we were 2 and 3 for the next year or 2, and then 3, 4, 5, So we were still big hit, yes. And it was a tough decision, but I don't know. I'd been playing the same character for 7 years. And the character was not really even anything like who I was in real life. And here I knew I was starting to get associated, so typecast and pigeonholed or associated with that character. I wanted to play a wide variety of characters and have longevity as an actor in all film, TV, different genres. And, comedy was something I felt, I could do comedy when I was starting out, but I was really more interested in drama. So that was a big reason. I felt, okay, it's time to move on. 7 years playing one character. The other reason was I also wasn't thrilled with the direction the scripts were going, and felt that they weren't as just at the same level that we were in those really good years. And it's very hard for a show after the 5th season to maintain that level. It's just, for some reason, I always heard the producers and Gary and people saying, I've heard that the 5 years after that, it gets tough creatively. And I think that was what we were prone to as well, the show. So that was another factor. I just felt, combine those things together, it was time to move on, but it was tough. And the thing that I missed the most was, people say, well, did you miss doing the show? And it's not so much, well, I want to do the show again, but I miss what we had as the relationship and working with all those people. That's the part that I would say I miss the most from that.
Yeah, if you watch the documentaries, if you watch the reunion shows, you can see the love between the cast and the crew. You did seem to be having a ball.
Yeah, we got along just, so well, and became family. And we respected, besides, enjoying each other as people, we also respected each other very much professionally, and knew that we were, because, back then, I say the critics and, they looked upon our show as kind of a piece of fluff and bunch of people, kids getting together and goofing off and having fun. But when I talk about it, I say we had a very talented group of actors who took the work very seriously and worked hard to make it look easy. And I think that has borne out when you see the talent that was involved. Look what Ron Howard has gone on to do, and Henry, and Marion, what she's done in her career, Marion Ross. Anson directed over 300 hours of television, of network television here. But at the time they thought, it's a bunch of kids goofing off. But we took the work pretty seriously. But we did have a good time because, thank God, we all got along so well.
Donny, I want to pull away from Happy Days. In fact, I don't want to pull away from Happy Days, but it would be bad manners not to talk to you about some other bits and pieces. In 1976, you had already recorded an album, and I think you had 2 or 3 hits in the Hot 100 in the Billboard chart. So Casey Kasem must have been counting down to your number and then to play your track on the radio. That must have been cool.
Yeah, I don't think I ever got to hear that. I wish I did. Yeah, that did happen because we actually, one of the songs, All Roads, it was called, got into the top 40 even. So that was pretty cool. I was excited. But, you know, when I got to do that first album, it wasn't really the music that I loved, or at least that I felt really good about singing, because my early love of music was more in the jazz, swing, standards, you know, the great standards and all that. But the label didn't want me to do that kind of music because it wasn't very commercial then. It was looked on as pretty passé at that point. It didn't have that sort of resurgence and renaissance that it did later on in the late 80s, 90s, and to all the way through now, where, you know, those standards in the Great American Songbook became popular again. So they, you know, I had to do more pop rock kind of material. So it was different, and it was my first time in the recording studio. So it was a great learning experience. And some of the tracks came out really well, but a whole different kind of style, you know, and not really in my wheelhouse, but it was great for me to do it. And it was all part of what led me, or at least what served me well in learning for now. And when I did my next album, which was many years later, about 2018, 17 or 18, when I came back to this music that I loved.
Donny, that is a big gap. 76 to 2018. That is a hell of a gap.
It is a big gap. Well, you know, I was busy doing, you know, other TV shows, a lot of theater, some feature films. So I was busy doing all that. And then I directed, then I got into directing. I directed a bunch of theater here in LA, and then I graduated up to where I wanted to, you know, find some film scripts to where I could get behind the camera. And that was 1998 when I got my first film off the ground, a movie called The Last Best Sunday, very dramatic piece. And so I was busy, and then I directed more after that. And I do some musical theater, so the singing would come into play when I did various musicals. You know, I had to utilize it, and every once in a while, I might have gotten to sing at on a variety show, or, you know, one of the variety shows that were on, or a charity event. But it wasn't, you know, like where I was like really putting on my own concert or anything like that. So I guess what happened was, you know, as I mentioned, the style of music started coming back into favor in the Harry Connick did that movie, did some music for When Harry Met Sally, and he recorded some of that music in that style. It Had to Be You, I think, and it started getting some traction. And, you know, Tony Bennett doing that Unplugged concert on MTV, and then artists like Diana Krall, who I don't know, she's very well known here, wonderful jazz pianist, vocalist, started doing, you know, bringing that back and having hits. And then a lot of people started doing albums of standards. Rod Stewart has done 5 albums of standards, you know. So and Tony Bennett, of course, his whole resurgence again, Michael Bublé. So I'm watching all this, and then, you know, one day it just hit me. You know, I said, well, if I'm ever going to do it, I better start now. You know, I probably waited. Why did I wait till 2000? Well, it was about 2015, 14, when I decided to put together an act. And I started doing jazz clubs in New York, LA and New York, Chicago. So it was 2015. But I don't know, I should have done it sooner in hindsight. But, you know, there's a time and a reason, I guess. Better late than never. You know, in hindsight, I wish I had started earlier and really kicked it in. I I don't know. It was a lot. You know what? I think I'll tell you what I think it was now that I'm talking about it out loud. I don't know if I had the confidence. And what really changed that for me was the technology, because I was able to take, on my computer in the comfort and privacy of my home office or whatever, and with a software like a program like GarageBand, I'm able to take all kinds of tracks and put them in there and record and experiment and just do it and just keep doing it and working it and playing with it. And I even found software that was able to remove the vocal for the most part from tracks. So I could take all these great Frank Sinatra tracks, take out his vocal and sing along, and sing to the track, to the great Nelson Riddle arrangement of it. So this technology, and I was a huge Bobby Darin fan with him doing, the jazz standards and swing like Mac the Knife and all that kind of stuff. I got to see Bobby at the Copacabana in New York City when I was 18 years old. So I was a huge Darin fan. He could do that music as good as all of them. But that's what changed it for me, because by being able to work at it, I must have sung hundreds of songs at home, just recording them. And it really built up the muscle and my, the musicality. And I got to a point where, all right, I'm going to put an act together, because I'd play it for people and people would be going, wow, that's you, that's you singing. And so, started to build up the confidence level. And I'd done it when I was 15 years old, doing nightclubs up in the Catskill Mountains. So it was in my blood. But that's probably why it took me so long. It was the confidence that I was able to build up from working and practicing and experimenting with it at home.
I must urge, because people may have looked at the thumbnail for this video and thought, oh, great, it's one of the cast members from Happy Days in an interview. But I must urge anyone who's enjoying this to look you up online, or maybe go to some of your YouTube singing videos, because you have a wonderful voice. And that's why we were playing Oh Baby Baby on the radio just the other night. And we got, we got some texts and some emails, and quite a few of them, and some phone calls saying, I can't believe that's Donny Most, which in a way is a compliment. But in another way, you must be thinking, well, of course it is. I can sing. Just because I was in a situation comedy doesn't mean I can't sing.
Yeah, but I understand the surprise, because, look at all these years and people never heard that or saw that. So I understand the surprise. And I would enjoy it actually when after a live show that I do, and people coming up to me and they're like, like they were telling you, I'm blown away, and you could see how kind of shocked they were. They did not expect it. And that to me was I take it as a really good compliment. I didn't think of it in a negative way at all.
No, look, I looked through your resume and there's so much there, and you've had a great career. But one of my questions was, right, you did a show, you guested in a show where the good and the great of Hollywood would go. And I'm guessing it was for the money. So I want to know, you got $500,000 for your episode, and I want to know who was in your episode of Love Boat.
Yeah, I did not get $500,000, but I did get 2 cruises. I went on 2 cruises, an Alaskan cruise, and that was one of the reasons. And then the other one was through the Panama Canal, so that was pretty cool. The first one I did, wow, there was some pretty heavyweight actors on there. Ray Milland was in it, Eleanor Parker.
Wow.
And then I'm trying to remember, there were a bunch of others. Mark Harmon was in it, and he was not yet known. It was one of his first things that he got, Mark. I can't remember. I know there were a bunch of other, pretty well-known actors in it, but I can't remember. And then the second one I did, I remember it was, my storyline was with Charlene Tilton. So she was in it, and I'm going to have to look back and see who else were the guests, because, sometimes they all start to, I did some of those and some other TV shows where I had, some famous guest stars that were on. And I don't want to say the wrong thing.
It was amazing. It was like no one had turned down the Love Boat because it was just star after star after star, week in, week out. Is that because Aaron Spelling knew everybody in Hollywood?
I guess I think it was probably a lot of actors. We think about like Ray Milland. He was probably was at the twilight of his career and he wasn't working that much anymore. And they said, he got the offer and you go on an Alaskan cruise. So he did. He said, okay, I'll do that. He's probably semi-retired by then or retired. Same thing with Eleanor Parker. So there were a lot of people who did it for that, and then it just became a thing to do. I guess it became a pretty big hit, and so why not? I actually, when they first offered it to me, I turned it down. I didn't want to do the show because, as I alluded to earlier, I was trying to break away from comedy, or not all comedy, but at least at that particular point, I thought it would be good to do something different and not comedic and too light. And so Love Boat was that. It was more in the light comedic vein. There's some little bit of drama, but not anything really serious. So I turned it down. But then it was like a year or two later, and they said, well, would you consider this one? And it's a 2-week cruise to Alaska and So then I was like, well, let me read the script, So I read the script, and actually I liked the scenes that my character was in. And my scenes were mainly with one of the regulars, Lauren Tweez, who played the, I forget the character's name, but she was sort of like the social director, and really, really nice actress, really, really, really good, and a really lovely lady, Lauren Tweez. So I saw that the scenes would be with her, and I liked the writing. I thought that, wow, this is surprisingly good. And I knew I could do something really interesting in one in particular, in one of those scenes. So I did it. And it actually turned out, I was right, that one scene turned out really good. It was kind of a dramatic scene. And I got a lot of great response to it. So it was good that I had a change of heart about doing it.
Hey, I've had an idea for you, Donny. I've had a great idea for you. When you're doing your, when we get back to doing gigs, which is coming soon, you could chuck the Love Boat in, the Jack Jones song that opened the show. You could chuck that in your live act and say, hey, did you know I was on the Love Boat?
Love Boat. God, it's funny. I wound up doing a show on a cruise a couple of years ago. I can't remember how it happened. A Princess Cruise, and I was doing a couple of shows, and Jack Jones was on that cruise, and he came to see my show, so that was so cool. And I was pretty nervous, but he was very complimentary to me afterwards. I think he was one of those surprise, like, oh, I didn't know you had those kind of pipes, that kind of thing. He had an amazing set of pipes, Jack Jones, boy.
Yeah,
he had golden pipes.
Yeah. I think even Sinatra was a fan of Jack Jones. In fact, I think Jack Jones used to go to school with Nancy Sinatra.
Oh, and you're right. I think I've heard that Sinatra was an admirer of Jack Jones as a singer because he was pure. He had a pure voice. Yeah.
Well, he told me that when I interviewed him, and I believe him. Listen, Donny, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to you. You've been a brilliant guest, and all the best with the singing. You've got a magnificent voice, and I've watched a lot of your stuff on YouTube, and you really know how to hold an audience. And I hope we see you over here in the UK very, very soon.
As do I. I'm so hoping that's going to come to fruition, and I look forward to it with bated breath. I know I'll have a blast. I can't wait.
Stars, Cars, Guitars was produced by Tom Stroud.